Everyone loves a good night's sleep, right? Get a little shut-eye, catch some Z's, crash out. 8 hours seems optimum. But is it possible there's a better way to do this? A best rest scenario? Here's what I found out. I'm Larry Fedoruk, and this is Later That Same Life. On each episode of my weekly podcast, a different topic, discussion, commentary, or story from our lives.
Season 21, Chapter 2, Sleep. Are we doing it wrong?
Ever heard the term first sleep? I only recently became aware of it. As a matter of fact, the term was lost for more than 200 years, only to be rediscovered in the 1990s by an historian. First sleep. And by the way, I want to give proper credit to the podcast series, The Hidden Timeline Files. It was their episode on this subject that brought it to my attention. First sleep. Well, that implies that there would be a second sleep, and that is correct. The medical term is biphasic, as in 2 phases. Apparently, it's the way we humans got our rest for centuries. Perhaps we're even hardwired that way, and this modern method of one-block consolidated sleep may not be the best for us. Interesting story on how this first sleep idea came back into our lives. A history professor at Virginia Tech, A. Roger Ekirch, was doing some research into the history of sleep. Oddly, there hasn't been a lot written on that subject. Oh, sure, there was some medical research, psychological papers about dreams, but the history of sleep itself, very little.
Roger Ekirch is a historian at Virginia Tech who has studied the history and evolution of sleep.
The sleep that we enjoy today is an artificial product of the last 2 centuries, rooted in modernity, not in the primeval past.
Sleep, where we spend about a third of our lives, until, of course, we hit the big sleep. Side note, isn't it interesting that when we finally hit the big sleep, the ceremony that honors and remembers us is called a wake? Wake literally comes from the idea that friends and family of the deceased stay awake to watch over the body until all final ceremonies take place. That's the big sleep. This is about the first sleep. Side note on a side note, I always wonder about the very first sleep. You know, early Homo erectus, the caveman. He must have had the animal instinct of sleep, right? Like he didn't think, oh my gosh, my eyes are heavy. I have no energy. I'm fading. Did he think he was dying? Or did he just think, I just got to become Homo horizontalis for a while? And if he did think he was actually dying, instead of just tired, when he woke up, it must have been a great relief. I wasn't dying after all. I was just bushed. I guess it was that long day of saber-toothed tiger hunting. But where were we?
The sleep that we enjoy today.
Oh yeah, first sleep research. During his historical studies on sleep, Professor Ekirch came across a manuscript from a British trial dated 1697. A young mother had been found dead on the street, and her daughter was called in for testimony. The daughter testified that her mother had just woken up from her first sleep and had gone outside. First sleep, thought the professor. Never heard that term before. Further, according to the court transcripts, no one questioned the young girl about the term or what it meant, like it was just an everyday accepted expression, whose meaning was already well known. Ekirch delved further, and over the coming weeks found over 2,000 references for the term first sleep, some going back centuries, millennia. Homer wrote about it in the Odyssey, Virgil in the Aeneid. First sleep, there it was coming up again and again, century after century of historical writing, and from all around the known world, across different cultures and over a dozen different languages. Premier sueño, premier sommeil, first sleep. From this, we were able to discern that this was the sleep pattern humans employed for centuries. perhaps even before recorded time. First sleep, here's how it works. A person would hit the hay, often literally, around 9 or 10 p.m. They would sleep an average of 3 to 4 hours and would naturally awake. Not only would they wake up, but they would get up. They would spend an hour or two busying themselves, performing chores, etc. Then they'd go back to bed till about dawn. They had a first sleep and a second sleep, and the period in between also had a name. It was called the watch. The watch became a most valued part of their day. For many, it was a time of peace, meditation, extreme clarity. In monasteries, they would schedule prayer and hymns during this time, this watch. For others, it was a period of great inspiration and resourcefulness. Word was that master writers and painters would use the watch to do some of their best work. The watch was when the muses were really speaking to them. Doctors in the day recommended that married couples use the watch as a time to conceive, advising that it would be of greater enjoyment and also lead to a healthier pregnancy. And for yet others, it was just a time to get some things done. Main point is that between the first and second sleep, you didn't just lie there and worry about trying to get back to sleep. You woke up, you functioned before going back to bed. Not only was this the pattern across civilizations over time, but what the professor also found is that the term suddenly disappeared, eliminated from the vocabulary. What happened? Well, we did. We happened to ourselves, in a manner of speaking. In a relatively brief period of time, we went from a civilization of hunters, gatherers, farmers, and traders, living our circadian rhythms, to a society of regulated factory workers. We industrialized. The disappearance of the first sleep aligns perfectly with the start of the first industrial revolution in the late 1700s. Captains of industry needed their workers to man the factories 10, 12, 14 hours a day, and then arrive home so exhausted that they would sleep in one long block so as to be ready for the shift the next day. Around the same time, artificial light entered the picture. Oh, sure, man had fire up to that point, but not the massive industrial artificial light. Gaslit street lamps sprung up in all the big cities. And within a few years, electric light. Factories ran 24 hours a day. Shift work began. We worked against our natural rhythms, not with them. First sleep was gone, replaced with one sleep, as much as you could get in order to be able to function again the next day. New disciplines were introduced, early to bed and early to rise. Oh, and start them young. Wean your child off the biphasic sleep patterns as early as possible. Teach your children the benefits of a fixed bedtime and a strictly enforced time to rise. And parents, you set a good example by doing the same thing. During the first Industrial Revolution, a man named Levi Hutchins invented the first mechanical alarm clock. Can't be late for the factory. We all know the feeling of the sound of that alarm clock and the feeling of, well, alarm. They called it that from the get-go. It wasn't a reminder clock, a nudge clock, a hint. It was an alarm. You must be awake now. I said now. Levi Hutchins invented the alarm clock to wake him for work. And from that very moment until today, our sleep no longer belonged to our biology. It belonged to capitalism. According to the Hidden Timeline files, an occupation emerged in old London to help people who could not afford those fancy new alarm clocks. They were called knocker-uppers. That's right. They were an early version of the wake-up call. Knocker-uppers were usually women trying to supplement the husband's factory income. You could pay knocker-uppers a few hay pennies and they would wander the streets at 3 and 4 in the morning, knocking on the doors of their paid clients until they awoke. Many of them carried long sticks so they could knock on the windows of people who lived on the second and third floors of their tenements. One such knocker-upper was Mary Smith. She became famous around London for her method. She used a pea shooter to shoot dried peas up at the windows. I wonder if she had a pea scale. Man, that guy's a heavy sleeper. It takes me 6 peas just to wake him up. He's a 6-peer. I'm going to have to start charging him more. As I said, first sleep disappeared as a habit and vanished from the language. It stayed that way for almost 200 years, until men like our Professor Ekirch rediscovered it. Also, in 1992, a psychiatrist named Thomas Ware conducted a biphasic sleep experiment at the International Institute of Mental Health near Washington. He placed 14 volunteer healthy adults in complete darkness for 14 hours a day. That was to simulate a long winter night. There was no artificial light allowed, not even candles, no screens, and no clocks. At the beginning, some of the men slept up to 11 hours per night, but within days, as they settled into their routines, all 14 fell into the same pattern: 3 to 5 hours of sleep, followed by an hour or so of calm wakefulness, then 3 or so more hours of sleep. This pattern was not encouraged or manipulated in any way, but appeared naturally, as if to say this was the way it was meant for humans. Remember the old Stephen Wright joke?
I woke up this morning and my girlfriend asked me if I slept good. I said, no, I made a few mistakes.
That's kind of the way I feel now about our new sleep pattern. We're making mistakes. Maybe we should go back to sleeping the way we were meant to.
This arguably was the pattern since the dawn of human time.
Unfortunately, the first sleep, the watch, and second sleep concept is incompatible with modern business interests, and of course even more easily accessible artificial light. This upsets the natural circadian rhythm. Circadian rhythm, by the way, is just a fancier way of saying our natural body clock, from the Latin circa for about, and dies meaning day. Our natural clock regulates several biological processes in our body over a 24-hour period, especially our sleep-wake cycle. The thing is, we don't allow this natural body clock to operate the way it's supposed to, the way it wants to, the way it can. I'm sure many of us have damaged our natural clock beyond repair. I bet a bunch of us don't even believe we have a natural body clock. Firstly, as I said, industry and commerce demand that we work on their cycle, not ours. And after that, we keep messing with our body clock. Things like artificial light, sugar, caffeine, alcohol, drugs, legal or otherwise, and much more. That cell phone on your nightstand. It's bad for you. Not only is it non-advantageous to the economy to work around our body clock, but now there's an entire economy built up around the fact that we work against it. An economy based on getting a good night's sleep. That's the goal, right? A solid block, consolidated as opposed to biphasic. You got to get yourself one of those smart, adjustable, temperature-regulated mattresses, expensive pillows. There's medications. Hey, doc, you got anything to help me get a good night's sleep? Then you need medications to stay awake. To help you sleep, you got to get some noise-canceling headphones. There's other sleep technology and wearables, white noise machines, ocean sounds, the heavy-weighted blankets, all to help you sleep. Sleep, the multi-billion-dollar industry. You know, the biggest mattress store in Canada is not called the Mattress World. It's called Sleep Country. Sleep. Sleep shouldn't be expensive. It should be free. It's in our natural body clock, which we damage beyond repair to earn money. Money which we then spend to try and get a good night's sleep. Wouldn't it be simpler just to first sleep, watch, and then second sleep? Perhaps. But where's the money in that? Now, there is a slight possibility that corporate attitudes towards sleep and productivity might be changing. There's the whole work from home concept, where one is in more control over our rest, our diet, our light, etc. Of course, there's already a corporate executive pushback against that. Work from home. And by the way, what is one of the greatest criticisms you can give someone about their job performance? They were asleep on the job. Asleep on the job. It's the worst thing you can do. That's how evil sleep is to the executives. There's also some companies, usually they're the Silicon Valley types, that are starting to offer nap pods. You've heard of those? A private, quiet place at work where you can slip away for 40 winks. Of course, they don't want you to be rested. They want to increase productivity. You can nap for 20 minutes if it means you're going to work another 5 hours. Napping during the day is sometimes considered part of the biphasic sleep concept. But just because you sleep more than once in a day doesn't mean you are truly biphasic in the classic sense. There actually is, though, something called accumulated sleep debt. For example, if your body really needs 8 hours of sleep per 24-hour cycle and you only get 6, that's a 2-hour debt that needs to be repaid before it builds up and starts to cause damage. So yes, you can catch up on your sleep as long as you don't stay sleep deprived for too long. Anyone who's done shift work knows about sleep deprivation all too well. Occasionally you run across these people too, right? Who need less sleep. They never seem to sleep. They brag about only sleeping a few hours a day. Doctors have discovered that's genetic. Not everyone has the I need less sleep gene. Most people need 6.5 to 8 hours per night. And yes, preferably night. And there's also such a thing as quality of sleep. You know, that deep REM sleep. That is the sleep that does for you what sleep is supposed to do. Sleep is supposed to completely restore your brain and body. It acts as a nightly reset that flushes out cellular toxins in your brain. It solidifies your memories. It regulates your hunger and stress hormones and repairs damaged muscles and tissues. Yeah, all that's going on when you're sleeping. As long as you're not adding any of those earlier ingredients that I mentioned, that's what a good night's sleep can do. They say also that in true biphasic, in that second sleep after the watch, that is some of the best sleep you will ever get. Also, allegedly, better dreams. And though many of us have likely not really practiced biphasic sleep, I think many of us can relate to it. Imagine how you feel on a vacation or even on a weekend when there's no alarm to set, no tight schedule to maintain. Although these days, man, that's harder and harder, right? We seem to overschedule everything these days, even our leisure. But you know that feeling? There's no time you really have to get up and nowhere you really have to be that day. It's freedom. I know that ever since I've been semi-retired, one of the great pleasures I have discovered is not having to set an alarm every night. Going to bed already worried about hearing the alarm in the morning, that I get enough sleep. I keep no clock, no phone, and no TV in my bedroom at all. And now when I wake up at 2 a.m, I don't have to panic. I'm not in a hurry to get back to sleep. Now, I don't actually get up and do stuff for an hour, but I do find that time a most wonderful period of calm. I come up with some of my best ideas then. Then I peacefully drift off to sleep again for a few more hours. That's got to be it. The first sleep, the watch, and the second sleep. It's funny how people will pay dearly to learn how to meditate, find peace and serenity, when really it could all be there already, in you, just waiting to be woken up at 2 a.m.
You want to switch? No, I just fell asleep.
Me too. I ain't bushed.
Good night.
Good night.
Later That Same Life is written, voiced, and produced by Larry Fedoruk. Larry Fedoruk, 37, @gmail.com. Subscribe to Larry's YouTube channel. Get automatic notifications with each new episode.